Back home, they'll be thinking about us when we are far away. Greetings and salutations, folks, and welcome once again, as always, to another helping of Mr. H's Hot Pot. A little bit of the World Cup winning squad from 1966 for you there. And you join me today, back in more familiar surroundings. I'm back in the old jalopy, and I'm back in dear old Blighty, boo-hoo. But, Hot Potters, every cloud has a silver lining. And, as promised myself that is, I have been to Mrs. Gent's and got myself a meat and prater pie. Lovely. Lovely. Piping hot, that, Hot Potters. Freshly baked, and I'll be partaking in that off camera once I've had a little chat with you guys. I've been craving that for about 3 days whilst I've been over there in Florida. You can have all that lovely food that the Americans have, but they don't have meat and prater pies over there. Everything's sweet and sugary over there, so I'm glad to get back to UK for some proper grub, as we know it. Anyway, Hot Potters, I've got about 4 videos that I made out there whilst I was in Florida. I did 2 off Disney property and 2 from inside the parks. I haven't filmed any rides or attractions, so if you're going to groan and say, oh, I don't want to watch that or a fireworks show, don't worry, they're not those. Simply, I've left those videos till I return back to the UK because they deserve better editing skills than I could give whilst I was over there in Florida. I was just using a little laptop and I was on Windows 10. I do not like Windows 10. It seems to have a mind of its own, that operating system. And I was just struggling, so I just did the daily vlogs, or vlogs, as Mr. H liked to call them. So, we're back home now. I've left Mrs. H and little Toby James there, suffering from jet lag a little bit more than I am. No doubt at some point I will crash and burn, but because I've had to go back to work today, I've not been able to suffer jet lag. I cannot give myself that luxury, Hot Potters. So what have I got planned moving forward now I'm all refreshed with a nice complexion and a healthy glow? Well, I had a number of videos that I had lined up that I intended doing before I left the UK. I just never got round to them. I was ready for an holiday. I was getting a bit sluggish on things. I couldn't be bothered, but I've come back and I'm full of energy. I'm bouncing, as it were, so it's been good for me. It really has. Now, there's a thing called a Wigan brekkie over here, and the Wigan brekkie is usually 2 meat and potato pies, or prater pies as I call them. I've only got 1 due to the cost of pies, which I'll go on to in a minute, and a can of Coke Zero in my case. I've lost a bit of weight while I've been out there, Hot Potters, which isn't too bad, and I only realised that when I got into the old jalopy, and usually I can stick my hand in between the steering wheel and my stomach and I can whittle it about a bit now. So I've lost a little bit, which isn't bad. I'm not surprised. You do some walking in them parks, you really do. One attraction, and especially in the Magic Kingdom, because you sort of track back on yourself. At one time, you used to be able to go to a Disney park and you'd start at one point and you'd work your way around the park in a methodical manner, which made sense, but you can't do that anymore because everything's done via an app now and you've got to book your time. You end up having to go to one place and then come back on yourself, so you cover some miles. It would have been interesting to have a Fitbit or whatever the latest gadget is now. I'm probably so 2018 talking about Fitbits, aren't I? And just seeing how many miles you walk in a day, it'd be surprising, especially out in that Florida heat. It really would. But yeah, I'm glad to be back home, although I've come back home to petrol shooting up. It's 10 pence more now than when we went out. I'm glad I filled the old jalopy up before I went. Number of times I've been done like that, Hot Potter. I've gone away on holiday, or vacation, to still use the American vernacular, and you fill it up, and then when you come back, prices have dropped, and you think, I wish I'd have left it. But this time, I'm ahead of the game. Don't know what's going on. I'll tell you something, Hot Potters. I think that there's going to be a revolution at some point. I really do. Not that I'm trying to fan the flames of that, but every revolution that's ever happened throughout the world, from the Russian Revolution even to our own English Civil War, was started by disgruntlement of the masses with a minority of privileged few who kept trying to screw them over. And that is happening across the world more and more today, and it's coming. It really is at some point. They'll have enough. One country will blow the top and it'll be like a domino effect across the world. It really will. Anyway, back to rainy old England. See the clouds there, out there. I don't know. You do miss it though. You do miss home. Not so after a few weeks. Once I'm a few weeks in and I felt like I've never been away, I'll be, ooh, I wish I was back in Florida, but I'm glad to be back home. I think we did 17 days in total. That's including your travel days, and I think it was a little bit too much. Mrs H wouldn't agree with me though, but after about 14 days of park bashing, I was ready for home, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I thought I'd make this video because I did promise myself that pie, and I promised on camera that I would make this video. And I'm glad I've been over to Florida as well, because I always promised myself that when restrictions were lifted on travel for unvaccinated people such as myself, we would go. Because Mrs H loves going to Florida. That's her thing. She went as a little girl and she's always carried that passion for Disney. And once travel restrictions started coming in, it did cause a bit of friction in the H household, because she went out and got vaccinated. She was quite happy to do that. I was a bit more hesitant. I'll simply be honest with you, Hot Potters, without going too much into it. I was fearful that I would have a bad reaction to the vaccine, and that's why I wouldn't get it. And I won't be getting it, because I fear that I could have a reaction to it. You know, I didn't want to be one of these people who keeled over, and then government didn't give a shit about you afterwards once you'd gone. You know, there was a lass up in Cumbria, her husband passed away with it, and she's still fighting for justice for her husband. And I didn't want to be one of those statistics. But it meant that I couldn't travel, and by extension it meant that Mrs H couldn't travel. I suppose she could in theory. She could have just took little Toby, because he wasn't required to be vaccinated. But it would have meant leaving me behind, and she didn't want to do that, and she stuck with it. And I said to myself, the first chances we can get to go over there, because I knew they'd lift them eventually, they would give up on people. They knew they would get to an hardcore of people who had no intention of getting vaccinated, no matter what they threatened them with, and then they would lift the requirement, and that's what they did. And I thought, the first time that happens, I'm over there with Mrs H, so I'm glad I've done it for her. And it's been better for us as a couple as well. You know, you should always do something like that. Go out and just have some time to yourselves as a family, away from the daily grind. So, Hot Potters, before this pie goes cowed, because it will do, cowed's cold for those of you who are not from Wigan, I'm going to tuck into this and enjoy it. So, until the next time, from myself, Mr H, when I will be doing a little video out and about. I'm not going to count the 4 ones that I will be uploading in due course. When I'm out and about back in the UK, it is bye-bye for now.